Welcome to the selected ones. When God is your strategist, even your quiet might sound like thunder to your opponents. There's a reason you walked through flames like it was a red carpet and emerged without the stench of smoke. You weren't just fortunate. You were more than simply brilliant, and you knew you had a wonderful heart. Let us be honest. This was spiritual conflict, not a personality fight. Fact, scientists found that the human heart creates an electromagnetic field that can be detected up to 3 feet away. However, when you are selected, your soul sends shock waves into areas you have yet to explore. That is not biology. That is heavenly backup. And we'll simply call it what it is. You didn't move like someone waiting for a miracle. You moved with the assurance that heaven had already cleared the way. While others waited for a sign, you were out there collecting receipts from wars you were never meant to win, but nevertheless won. They termed it arrogance. They told you'd be under pressure. They laughed at how unconcerned you seemed. Meanwhile, you were battling spiritual giants in the shower like it was a WWE showdown. But they realized you moved like someone had supernatural security clearance. In this video, we're going deep, not into the superficial gods that watch over you and put things on coffee cups, but into the unvarnished, soul-igniting truth of why the chosen ones don't move like the others. Because carrying light from the throne chamber itself does not result in a random route. It's planned. So get your drink, diary, and shoot. Grab your sage, if you still do it. Let's dive into why you relocated. Like someone who understood the divine wasn't only watching, but also supporting you like an army with something to prove. Let's go. Number 1, you were not following your instincts. You were following heavenly instructions disguised as gut impulses. Most people believe that intuition is just a gut sensation or some kind of emotional guessing. But you've never relied just on instinct. It seemed like a sudden need to abandon that employment by turning left instead of right, to end the connection or to speak out during a tense situation. Those were not random desires. These were heavenly instructions disguised as gut sentiments. You were getting encrypted signals from a higher source, and you didn't have to completely comprehend them to act on them. You simply knew. That is what divides you. You weren't making decisions solely on reasoning. You did not need a 5-year plan to go ahead. You moved. When the atmosphere changed, you reacted to energy before evidence. While everyone else sought evidence, you moved with calm. Peace for you was evidence enough. What the world saw as irresponsible, unstable, or impetuous was really a spiritual download that bypassed your brain and went directly to your bones. You were never out here making rash judgments. You were carrying out divine plan before the result even made sense. That's why you can leave everything behind with no backup plan and yet land on your feet. You were not falling. You were redirected. Every choice you made with that type of direction had weight behind it. You never guessed. You were being directed. The craziest part, you made it seem simple. You weren't always able to express yourself. There were no blueprints to display. You simply knew what you needed to do. And something deep inside verified it before reality could catch up. This is what made you untouchable. In rooms where others were still attempting to read the handbook, you were the handbook. You weren't just intuitive. You received spiritual instruction. You were not fortunate. You were in tune. And every time you listened, there was evidence. The divine wasn't just seeing you move. It was passing through you. Number 2, you did not just take chances. You made prophetic leaps disguised as recklessness. They claimed you were impetuous, acted too quickly, and didn't consider things through. But what they didn't realize was that your alleged irresponsibility was a result of heavenly timing, not human reasoning. You were not just taking chances. You answered calls that only you could hear. And such calls lacked explanations. They arrived with haste. When it came time to relocate, you didn't hesitate because you sensed something larger was already happening. People glanced at your options and shook their heads. How could you quit that job without a safety net? How could you terminate a relationship that seemed wonderful on paper? Why start anything new when everything seemed to be stable? To them, it was insane. But you were not attempting to make sense. You were striving to keep in tune. You were pursuing something divine, something beyond profound for surface-level comprehension. Your steps did not seem safe because they were never designed to be. They were deliberate escapes from systems that would have strangled your mission if you had remained. And every time you took a dangerous move, they saw it as a gamble. But it was not a risk. It was all about obeying. You weren't just hoping things would work out. You moved as if you knew what was about to happen. You walked without fear since you weren't alone. The divine had gone before of you, clearing roads that had yet to be made. That's why everything appeared to fall into place at the final moment. It was not luck. It was an alignment. Most people don't know what it's like to walk with that kind of spiritual conviction. They call it dangerous because they have never walked on water without sinking. But you've done it too many times to count. Not because you are courageous, but because you are supported. You did not just take chances. You walked with prophetic timing. That is why each jump you performed did not result in a fall. It was flight number 3. You made survival seem simple because they didn't notice the mystical grasp that pulled you through misery. You made surviving seem much too simple. This puzzled a lot of people. They saw you smiling. They watched you come up, do your thing, and remain sort of firm. They didn't realize what you had to go through in the dark when no one was applauding. They didn't witness the night you grieved in quiet or the mornings you woke up exhausted, but did it nonetheless. They couldn't hear the mental conflicts, spiritual burden, or emotional instability you were dealing with while still bearing the weight of others. You weren't just surviving. You were being carried. You were so shattered at times that you couldn't even pray properly, yet you managed to get through it. That was not strength. That was divine intervention with your face. People assumed you had it together. They thought that you were constructed differently. They didn't comprehend you were kept together by something invisible. Your survival was not due to effort alone. It was a magical grasp. Grace appeared as armor when you had no other protections. It was the hand of someone greater, rescuing you from conditions that should have consumed you whole. Some folks could not endure even one chapter of your narrative. They'd lose their wits simply attempting to experience a single week of what you'd had to go through for years. But you kept going, not because you possessed the tools, but because the supernatural refused to let you fall. That is why others underestimated what you were going through, because you did not wear your wounds as medals. You were quiet about your suffering, but it didn't make it any less genuine. It just meant you weren't doing it alone. Your narrative seems clean on the surface, yet it is saturated with survival that no one saw coming. And the most striking aspect is that you did not only survive for yourself. You became a blueprint. You proved that when the divine is on your side, what should have shattered you becomes the same thing that makes you stronger. You didn't just make it through. You made it undeniable. Number 4, your suffering was not coincidental. It was a classified training routine for spiritual combat. Your anguish was not the result of a random set of terrible circumstances. It wasn't terrible luck, bad timing, or poor decisions. It was a well-planned sequence designed to shape your soul in ways that comfort could never do. The betrayals, the losses, the loneliness, the times when you questioned your value and sanity. None of this happened by chance. They weren't just unpleasant chapters. These were encrypted teachings, perfectly timed, intended to introduce you into a state of spiritual consciousness. You couldn't get in any other way. Every betrayal, it wasn't simply one person acting disloyal. It was a test of your judgment, limits, and self-esteem, allowing specific individuals in your life to teach you how to see clearly in the spirit rather than breaking you down. Because you've been hurt by someone you trusted, you will never confuse charm for character again. Before someone says anything, you can feel their vibe. That is not paranoia. That is spiritual refinement. And the quiet you were forced to sit through, that was not weakness. That wasn't you being passive or afraid. It was a spiritual recalibration. It was wonderful to drown out the cacophony around you and finally hear your own frequency. When nobody was phoning and you weren't invited. When you were ostracized, disregarded, or misunderstood. It wasn't rejection, but heavenly seclusion. That's when your spiritual weapons were honed. That's when your judgment improved. That's when you stopped reacting and began recognizing. You learned how to converse in silence, fight without moving, and change atmospheres just by coming into a room. Pain teaches you things that tranquility never can. And now you're no longer soft. You are strategic. You don't simply feel things, you know them. You read spirits, not circumstances. You see trends before they become issues. You aren't overprotective. You are prepared. What nearly destroyed you was your initiation. You were not being broken. You were designed not for comfort, but for battle. You weren't just wounded. You were being toughened for the holy conflict. Go to number 5. They assumed you were ignoring them. You were following orders to withdraw from low-frequency warfare. They said you were chilly. They said you swapped up. They accused you of behaving completely new. However, they failed to see that when you disengaged, you were not ignoring anybody. Rather, you were complying. It was not out of pride, pettiness, or avoidance. It was an internal instruction from a higher level asking you to go immediately, and you obeyed even though it made you appear like the villain. You did not ignore people. You outgrown circumstances where you had to lower your lights to maintain the peace. You abandoned talks where the truth was unwanted. You walked away from dynamics that continuously depleted you, not because you were dramatic, but because your energy was being used without regard. Your presence has become a feeding ground for the insecure, manipulative, and low vibrational. You were not involved in a friendship. You fought a quiet fight, and once you saw it, you realized that remaining was no longer spiritual. It was self-destruction. You did not reject anybody. You refused to continue validating individuals who only came alive when you were being attacked. You saw how your anguish became their enjoyment, how your weakness turned into their weapon, how your breezes made them oddly silent, and your hardships made them strangely supportive. That is not support. That is spiritual parasitism. And when the divine revealed the truth to you, it came without discussion. It arrived with clarity. Leave now. You began noticing how your soul reacted to various individuals. Tense, uncomfortable, and weary. You weren't being too sensitive. That was your soul warning danger. You were not being disrespectful when you stopped answering the phone or showing up. You were obeying heavenly directions to withdraw from battle disguised as relationships. Some individuals wanted to have access to you without having to show respect. They loved you more when you were doubtful of your abilities. But the instant you awoke, the dynamic shifted. You ceased being their mirror and began to pose a danger. So they claimed you changed. You did not. You've just understood that spiritual combat isn't always noisy. It is frequently disguised as love. And you chose peace over pretending you weren't neglecting everyone. You were safeguarding your task. Sixth, your delays were a mask for divine redirection. Everyone else seemed to be moving. New employment, new connections, major successes, and future steps. Meanwhile, you were experiencing a season that seemed like quicksand. Regardless of anything you attempted, doors did not open. Opportunities slipped beyond your grasp. You prayed. You pressed. You hustled. Still, nothing moved. It felt like failure, as if anything were wrong with you. But it wasn't a failure. It was for protection. Wearing the clothing of delay, your delayed season was not stagnant. It was heavenly rerouting. You were not being penalized. You were being protected while you questioned your value. Heaven was barring pathways that may have shattered you. You had no idea that the opportunity you were weeping over missing would have put you in the crosshairs of sabotage. You had no idea that the relationship you were grieving would sap your calling. You couldn't see the storm coming, but heaven did. Instead than allowing you to dash directly into devastation, it delayed your pace, even when you begged to relocate. That is why the delay was so puzzling, because you were not lazy. You were not unqualified. You were only being protected from something your eyes could not perceive yet. Everyone else was applauding their fast forward. What they didn't understand was that some of them were running into traps. Some of them were entering rooms they weren't spiritually ready for. You were not refused. You were being made ready. And when it came time to relocate, you noticed the difference. The vibe altered. What was once difficult became easy. What was once blocked has suddenly opened. That's when you knew it wasn't about the delay. It was a heavenly alignment all along. You were not late. You were exactly on heaven's timetable. You moved as if you were protected, and you were. Your sluggish season was not a punishment. It was a heavenly holding pattern, intended to protect you from clashing with anything that may pollute your goal. So, while others applauded for speed, you learned to appreciate divine timing. And now that the door is open, you are not wandering about in uncertainty. You're stepping inside covered number 7. You were never lost. You were concealed. You were not lost. Not for a single second. You knew who you were. Deep down, even if the world didn't. People just couldn't see it. They strolled by you, looked through you, and dismissed you, believing you were just another silent person trying to find your path. They didn't know your invisibility was deliberate. You were not ignored. You were concealed. Heaven shrouded you in a darkness that seemed to be rejection but was really protection. You were not left out of rooms. You were being kept out of rooms that weren't prepared for what you brought. There is a distinction. Your quiet was not passive. Your absence from the spotlight did not indicate a failure to ascend. It was a divine plan to keep your power protected as it evolved. Early exposure would have made you a target even before you were completely armored. Instead, you were put behind the scenes to observe, learn, and grow. People misinterpreted your silence for perplexity. They believed you had no purpose, vision, or goal. But you did. It was just sacrosanct. It wasn't time yet. You were going with such a weighty vision that heaven had to hide it only to keep you safe from jealousy, sabotage, and premature attacks. Some people would have attempted to turn you off before you had a chance to spark up. So heaven has temporarily muffled your brilliance. Not because you were worthless, but because your revelation would be too dramatic, too soon. You've always been the storm hiding beneath a serene exterior. The system disruptor calmly observes the soul with ancient knowledge in a culture concerned with trends. Your delayed appearance was not due to a failure to show up. The supernatural held back a flood till the land was robust enough to absorb it. And now, the revelation is almost here. The transition is occurring. You were not invisible because you were little. You were imperceptible because you were precious. And when heaven conceals a chosen one, it's only because their entrance will have a lasting influence on generations. Number 8. You did not just walk away from harmful situations. You demolished vast demonic structures with your departure. When you went out, it seemed that you were done, tired and fed up. People felt you were extremely emotional or sensitive. They assumed you couldn't manage pressure, accept criticism, or play the game. But they didn't comprehend your departure wasn't personal. It was prophetic. You were not only fleeing to save yourself. You were being taken out to bring down systems that couldn't function without your light. You were more than simply present. You carried heavenly order, and stability followed you into chaos like a shadow. Peace clung to your energies like armor, even when you didn't say anything. Your soul anchored environs. You fought back storms just by being present. But hazardous environments do not respect that level of authority. They take advantage of the situation. They drained it. They weaponize your kindness and label it a vulnerability. So, when heaven gave the signal and you walked away, everything that relied on your silent protection began to break apart. Some houses became cooler. Some teams began fighting. Some partnerships have lost their artificial harmony. That was not drama. A spiritual void has been revealed. You were the glue, and they didn't realize it. The false serenity, hidden dysfunctions, and evil that was previously comfortable pretending around you were forced to reveal itself. Your absence caused the truth to arise. What seemed to be a calm exit was really heavenly destruction. You did not yell. You did not destroy any relationships. You did not beg to be understood. You've just departed. When you did, stronghold began breaking. Manipulators lost their preferred energy source. Controllers could no longer regulate the atmosphere. Environments that rely on your quiet to flourish could no longer conceal their illness. You were never just a part of the room. You were the spiritual anchor in it. And as you left, everything that had been spiritually supported by your presence collapsed. That was no coincidence. Heaven was yanking you out like a keystone from a fake temple because the whole structure needs to fall. And your obedience enabled that collapse. Number 9. People believed you were strange because their devils detected your anointing before their brains could understand it. They were not just. People often labeled you odd as an insult, but it was really their demons responding before their brains could catch up. You did more than simply stand out. You upset a whole hidden battlefield. Their distress stemmed from neither your words nor your behavior. It was about the energy. You carried something raw, completely, and unabashedly real that they were not prepared to confront. You strolled into rooms and changed the ambience without raising a finger. That was not magic. It was a spiritual upheaval. They were not only outraged or judgmental. Their spirits detected the peril before their brains did. You were a live antithesis to their gloom, a bright light that exposed areas they tried to keep hidden. Your presence made their anxieties, phobias, and secret scars twitch uncomfortably. You didn't even need to attempt. Just being you roused their deep shadows, agitating the spiritual restlessness they'd spent years concealing under layers of facade. It's why they responded so strongly, since your genuineness exposed their deceit. Your strength highlighted their vulnerabilities. Your contribution disrupted their turmoil. You came there and disturbed their comfort zones in ways that rationality could not explain. That is why people called you strange, tough, or too much. It was not about you. It was about what you pushed them to face inside themselves. Your anointing was not only a gift. It was a live trigger for spiritual upheaval. People attempted to quiet you, to box you in, but you were too alive for it. You moved differently because your spirit was connected to a force beyond our comprehension. Their response was not personal. It was an indication that you were just where you should be. You were supposed to disturb spiritual war zones. Number 10. You never fit in because you were created to realign the system, not to be devoured by it. You never fit in because you were never supposed to. The system, with its cozy routines and uncontested ideas, was never intended for someone like you. You were not created to go with the flow or accept the status quo. You were created to realign it, to disrupt the foundations that everyone else had accepted. That's why you've always felt out of place, like a jigsaw piece inserted into the wrong box. It was not a defect in you. The system was resistant to your presence. Your entire presence is a direct danger to spiritual complacency. While others settle for surface-level facts and simple solutions, you are wired differently. You hold codes deep inside yourselves. Divine programming that exposes falsehoods, illusions, and concealed deceptions. These codes aren't only for knowing. They are about unveiling. They dismantle the cozy illusions that keep people trapped, confused, or sleeping, making you hazardous to the system because you expose what it relies on to maintain control. Ignorance, fear, and conformity. You move differently because your mission is not to blend in or be quiet. You are here to disturb, disrupt, and confront. That is why some people see your energy as strong, while others find it unpleasant. You won't settle for faking or playing small. When things go wrong, you refuse to tolerate half-facts or silence. Simply being present is a catalyst for transformation, a spark that starts flames in areas that have been chilly for too long. You were not called to remain unseen or safe. You were chosen to be a realigning force, a live reset button. So, the next time you feel like you don't fit in, realize that it's because you belong someplace fresh and revolutionary. You aren't designed to fit in. You're supposed to break through the number. You did not recover alone. You recovered from divine surgery with no anesthetic. You did not mend in a comfortable spot with soothing words or fast cures. You had divine surgery without anesthetic. Every cut, stitch, and raw moment was required to rewrite the code of your spirit. What others term healing was nothing short of a rebirth for you. a full demolition and rebuilding at the deepest level. The anguish was not just physical or mental, it was spiritual and transforming. Something so powerful that you bled in silence as the very essence of who you are was being rewritten. This was not a gentle procedure. It did not come with the luxury of time or a smooth landing. You were taken down, exposed, and rebuilt piece by heavenly hands who understood precisely what you needed, even if you didn't realize it. There was no anesthetic, since it would have dulled both the agony and the growth. The rawness was necessary to drive you past your previous constraints and prepare you for a frequency so high that mankind isn't even equipped to accept it. That is why the person you have become is no longer compatible with your history. The healed version of you seems to be a stranger to former friends, family, and events that previously characterized your life. They don't recognize your power, tranquility, or the blazing light you now bear, since they have only seen the damaged version before. But what they saw was vital. Your metamorphosis was quite significant. It altered your spiritual DNA, mentality, and energy signature. You're not merely better. You're completely different. Healing for you was not a step forward. It was a rebirth into a new plane of existence. And since this new version of yourself vibrates on a higher dimension, it's normal for old ties to seem strange. They can't follow you there. You're on a journey that requires isolation, bravery, and unwavering confidence in what only heaven can see. The stillness you maintained throughout that bleeding was your refuge, your holy zone, where your soul was recreated for a purpose beyond the comprehension of the world around you. A number. They attempted to curse you, but the curses were ineffective since your lineage was already identified as impenetrable. They believe they can break you down with every curse, whisper, and evil ritual. But they didn't comprehend your lineage wasn't just blessed. It was described as unbreakable from the outset. This was no accident or chance. It was a spiritual agreement established long before you breathed your first breath. A holy edict that no curse could defeat their efforts to sabotage. You were bound to fail because the foundation underneath you was created by heavenly hands and sealed with strength that would not fracture. No hex, poison rumor, or twisted ritual had the ability to harm what was divinely protected. What they intended as weapons became mirrors reflecting their own impotence rather than weakening you. Every assault they attempted failed, glitching against an invisible barrier put up by the divine. This barrier did more than simply prevent damage. It turned their resentment into fuel, using what was intended to harm you as an engine, driving you forward quicker and stronger. Your adversaries couldn't grasp this. They thought that spiritual battle was about harm and defeat. They didn't know that for you. It was about transcendence. Every negative energy they transmitted was diverted, transformed, and magnified to speed up your development, awakening, and ascent. Curses returned in the form of strength rather than agony. The poison was digested and converted into vitality, so any efforts to dampen your light simply made it burn brighter. This impenetrable mark provides more than simply protection. This is a statement. It states that your destiny is unchangeable, your path unstoppable, and your soul impenetrable. You stroll through battlefields with armor that curses cannot pierce. Gossip cannot tarnish, nor can ceremonies be weakened. You don't just endure spiritual assaults. You ascend above them, propelled by a supernatural pact that ensures your victory before the battle ever starts. A number. You didn't just survive the setups. You transformed them into spiritual receipts. You accomplished more than merely survive the traps put out for you. You transformed each of them into unmistakable spiritual receipts. When somebody deceived you, unjustly accused you, or attempted to tarnish your reputation, it was more than simply an unpleasant experience. They were proof being recorded in a holy ledger while you were feeling the sting. Heaven was silently accumulating evidence, painstakingly filing case after case that no human court could ever handle. This was not about getting even. It was about divine justice in action. Every life set against you and every trap intended to impede your destiny was meticulously chronicled. Your anguish was not in vain. It was an essential component of creating a spiritual archive that confirms your reality without a shadow of doubt. This is not simply a metaphor. These receipts exist in the spiritual dimension. They possess weight, authority, and power. Now it's time for those files to unlock doors. Your adversaries hoped that the doors would remain locked forever. Those who sought to damage you are astonished because they don't realize the magnitude of responsibility that awaits them in invisible tribunals. Their efforts to silence you failed, resulting in the very proof that ensures your vindication. You stride forth with the assurance of someone whose truth has been recorded in a book that cannot be altered or erased. These receipts are not just recollections. They are keys that unlock your next season. Each betrayal was a step toward revealing the darkness. Each false charge adds a brick to the foundation of your breakthrough. You didn't just survive. You created a fortress of indisputable truth around yourself. And now that stronghold stands tall, hesitant but functional, ready to destroy any effort to alter your tale. Your adversary's worst weapons are your greatest evidence. And heaven is holding the ultimate decision. A number. You moved as if supported by the Almighty. Because deep down, you knew who you were before the world attempted to make you forget. You moved like someone with more than simply faith. They felt a strong, unbreakable connection to something far larger than themselves. This was not about faking confidence or pretending to be powerful for the sake of appearance. It was spiritual memory, a kind of understanding so old and deeply ingrained that no one could take it away, no matter how hard they tried. While other people were rushing, bewildered, and guessing their way through life, your spirit was quietly humming with knowledge handed down from before time began. It was as if you had an internal soundtrack that played in a language that others couldn't comprehend. That's why your path seemed crazy to people around you. They perceived your actions as irresponsible and your judgments as unsafe. Your trust is blind. But you were not out here to prove anything to anybody. You were merely dancing to a beat that existed far beyond the sounds of this world. A rhythm from a world where time, fear, and uncertainty did not exist. It was the spot where your actual self had always resided, waiting eagerly for you to recall. The world may have attempted to obliterate that memory by inflicting chaos, suffering, and distraction onto you, but it never worked. Deep down, you never lost who you really were. An everlasting soul on a heavenly mission, leaving a legacy that could not be ignored. Your movements, decisions, and even silences were all matched with that recollection, propelling you inexorably toward a destiny that others couldn't see or comprehend. You were not lost or walking aimlessly. You were traveling with purpose, propelled by a power beyond rationality. You held an old understanding that helped you navigate the turmoil, a spiritual compass that pointed true north, no matter how fierce the storm surrounding you. And this is what made you unstoppable. Everything is for the chosen. You never moved through the anguish, betrayals, or quiet struggles at random or without purpose. It was a spiritual dance created by a force beyond the ordinary, a supernatural plan that positioned you just where you needed to be, transforming you into the unstoppable powerhouse you are today. You didn't just withstand the storms. You converted them into the basis of your power. The others around you may have misinterpreted your path, branded your light as weird, or rejected your actions as irresponsible. But you were always moving with heavenly certainty, which comes only from knowing who you actually are. Your presence is not accidental. This is a declaration, a live testament that the universe's invisible powers are completely behind you. This is not about pride or ego. It's about accepting the profound, unbreakable fact that you were created to disrupt, realign, and reconstruct on a scale that most others can't fathom. You carry codes throughout your very essence. Codes that break lives, expose buried darkness, and forge new routes where none thought imaginable. The delays you experienced were never setbacks, but rather divine pauses preparing you for breakthroughs that will rock systems and rewrite destiny. You did not heal quietly. You were birthed from heavenly fire, forever changed and increased to frequencies that the world is not prepared for. Your lineage is protected by unbreakable spiritual contracts, which transform curses into catalysts and assaults into accelerators. Every false allegation and treachery has been documented in a holy ledger, which is now poised to unlock doors and deliver justice that no human court can reach. And while you traveled through it all, you carried an old spiritual memory, a beat from regions beyond this world that guided every step with absolute surety. So, when you stand on the verge of being all you were meant to be, realize that your narrative is everything from average. You're not here to blend in or play tiny. You are here to shake things up, upset complacency, and spark change. The divine isn't just observing you. It drives every action you do, every decision you make, every success you claim. Walk fearlessly with that knowledge because the world is waiting for the full manifestation of the power you were created to be. Your time has come. If this message connected with you and you're ready to walk into the power of your real purpose, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future deeper truths. Hit the like button. If you sense the power of these words, leave a comment below and share your experience or views, since your voice is important here. Do not keep this to yourself. Share this video with those who need to hear it. We're creating a community of irrepressible spirits, and your support supports this movement. Keep connected, keep vigilant, and understand that you will never travel this route alone. God bless you.